Barnard. It's a great privilege and honor to be here. I want to just share with you my brief story about Eli, who single-handedly made the most positive impact on my whole life. I will start with the two biggest contributions he made, and he made many. The last words he ever gave to me, and the first words he ever gave to me. His last words were, "You have a responsibility to not stand in my shadow, but to stand on my shoulders." These words haunt and inspire me every single day. Why? I'll take you back to the first words he gave me. I attended a seminar in 1993. So I was 24 years old. Today, a few days ago, I was 48, so 24 years back. And I got all my courage together, and during the break time, I asked him a question, and to my horror, got into a vicious argument with him. One of many to come, apparently. And at one point, he had the state of mind to just grip me by the arm, and he said to me, "Just, young man, stop. What's your goal in life?" And I gave him this long list, and he was shaking his head so vigorously I thought he was going to fall off the chair. And I said, "Well, how can you disagree with my goal?" And we got into another argument. So he finally said, no, I'm disagreeing with your definition of a goal. So I said, "What's your definition of a goal?" And he said, "It's very simple. It's a dream taken seriously." And he said to me, "So what's your dream?" And I said, I want to help people see and unlock their inherent potential that's within them. And I drew this little picture. And I said, this is the real potential, and this is the actual. And I want to help close that gap. I want to help people see that gap, how big it is, and help them, rather than lower their expectation, I want them to lift up their expectation. And he was suitably impressed, and I was so relieved. And then he said to me, "So how are you going to take this dream seriously?" And I started sharing with him, and I said, "But I could really utilize some advice." And he gave me two pieces of advice. He said, "Look, if you want to make a contribution in any field, there's 3 phases that you have to go through. You start with classification, then go to correlation, and then to causal theories. So you first answer what you are talking about in terms of what are the parts that relate to this problem that you're trying to solve, how do these parts relate to each other, and then why do they relate in that way." So I said, "Thank you very much. What's the second piece of advice?" He said, "Don't make the mistake of going from the general to the specific. Start with the specific and go to the general. So pick something that you really understand well, make your contribution there, and then generalize." So I want to share just briefly what it is that I learned from this journey. Very long and adventurous journey, the Odyssey, and I'll end up with the Odyssey program and show you how it's come full circle. The thing that we got into an argument was, how do you best treat promotions within a fast-moving consumer goods industry that I was working. I was making pots and pans, had a whole engineering team working with me, designed all the industrial engineers, and we couldn't figure out how to deal with promotions. And it helped me to understand what makes it so difficult for managers to manage within very complex environments. And there's an acronym which I started using called VUCA. And this explains the thing that makes it so difficult for people to make decisions, whether you're managing an organization or your own life. There's volatility, there's uncertainty, there's complexity, constraints, and ambiguity. Each of these factors by themselves make it very hard to make decisions. We then throw people into these environments and we expect them to make good decisions fast. And it's really, really hard. So I started with this, and then I realized, so the first thing I needed to do from a classification point of view is to say, as a result of this, we're going to be making mistakes. And there's 2 types of mistakes that we'll make. The first one is unavoidable. We have to make sure that we understand unavoidable mistakes. These are things that are noise. Don't try to figure out why. If you're forecasting the weather, you're going to make mistakes, right? But the important one is avoidable mistakes. And again, classification between avoidable is inconsequential, doesn't really matter, and consequential. And I realized that this was the area that I wanted to target. I want to find practical ways to help people reduce the avoidable and consequential decision mistakes that they were making. And it also helped to look at the correlations. How do these things relate to each other? But what took me a long time to figure out, and I'd asked Eli many times, and he couldn't give me good answers. So he gave me the challenge. He said, you tell me. And the question was, why did you call this thing theory of constraints? And he started off, he said, in science, a theory is just a good explanation about why something is useful and important. And it took me a long time, 20 years, to figure out why the knowledge of a constraint in a system is useful and important. Because it helps us to make 5 different types of decisions. The first one is, how do I set goals that are both ambitious and realistic at the same time? And knowing the constraint is almost the fast track to be able to do that. The second one is, how do I judge the impact of decisions? Identify the highest leverage opportunities. How do I do that? And again, knowledge of the constraint is a fast track to be able to do this. The third one is, how do I decide where to focus? And again, knowing the constraint in the system is a fast track to knowing where to focus and what not to focus on. The fourth one is, what are the rules that I should use to manage the whole system by? And again, knowing the constraint is a fast track to figuring it out. Turns out that the rules to optimize a constraint also optimizes the whole system. And the last one is when to change the rules. And I realized that this is what, at least for me today, is theory of constraints. It's a very practical explanation of why constraints are so useful to us within our own life and within organizations, because we are having to make decisions every single day facing these 5 obstacles. So that's sort of in a nutshell about where my focus has been, and I've been extremely privileged to have made my life running a research lab and having the ability to partner with leading organizations around the world. We now have joint innovation labs with Microsoft, with BHP Billiton, the largest mining company, with Cargill, one of the biggest agri-food companies, with Tata and a few others. And of course, the biggest research lab of them all was the Odyssey program that I had the privilege to start running around 2005, first with Lamore and John, and then later by myself. And it's continuously allowed us to go guide people through these, to show them the conceptual mistakes that we make that's both avoidable and consequential when we set goals, when we try to determine the impact of changes, external or internal, when we decide what to focus on and what not, when we decide what rules to use and when to change those rules. And that's given me the full circle to continue to develop knowledge by going at specific examples that we understand really, really well. And once we have made breakthroughs in those specific examples, to generalize the knowledge and see in what other areas we can make valuable contributions. So it's to Oded and Jelena, thank you so much for inviting me, and for Rami for hosting this. It's been an incredible journey, and the exciting part is we are just starting. But just to tie up to what Rami said today, we have a responsibility to not stand on Eli's shoulders. We have to stand on his, not to stand on his shadow, but to stand on his shoulders. We cannot have inertia become our biggest constraint, and our community currently is stuck. We have a joint responsibility to become unstuck. Thank you very much.